My husband had hired a hitman to eliminate me, his ultimate goal being to seize my entire fortune. Little did he know days later, I would stage my own demise, a deception so complete, he couldn't possibly foresee the lengths I was willing to go to avenge his treachery. Naomi Vance emerged from the towering edifice that housed her prestigious downtown law firm, a palpable sense of triumph radiating from her. Yet, beneath the surface, a growing disquiet gnawed at her. She had just secured a landmark corporate victory, a win that promised to elevate her status and deliver a significant year-end bonus. The accolades and backslaps from her colleagues felt hollow, devoid of genuine warmth. A practiced smile masked her inner turmoil as her thoughts drifted to Julian, her husband, who in recent months had transformed into a virtual stranger. That evening, Naomi arrived home earlier than expected. The residence, an elegant brownstone nestled in the exclusive Buckhead enclave of Atlanta, exuded an unusual stillness. The living room lights cast a warm glow, but Julian was nowhere to be found. His sport coat lay carelessly draped over the sofa, and a half-empty glass of whiskey sat perched on the glass table. "Julian," she called out, her voice firm and clear. From the kitchen came the distinctive metallic clang of the refrigerator door closing. Julian appeared, as impeccably groomed as ever, his shirt flawlessly pressed and his hair slicked back. But something in his smile sent a cold shiver down Naomi's spine. "You're home early," Julian remarked, his tone light, yet his eyes seemed to be calculating her every move. "I wrapped up the case ahead of schedule. I thought we could have dinner together, like in the good old days," she replied, setting her briefcase down on a chair and kicking off her heels. Julian hesitated momentarily, as if weighing the suggestion, then nodded. "Sure, let me order something. I haven't had a chance to cook." As Julian reached for his phone, Naomi watched him, a complex mixture of affection and a darker, more unsettling emotion swirling within her. The detached demeanor he had adopted recently troubled her deeply. The subtle lies she had caught him in, and his increasing absences, had begun to erode the foundation of trust that had once been the bedrock of their marriage. That night, as they ate takeout sushi in front of the television, Naomi attempted to bridge the widening gap between them. "How's the Onyx Lounge doing? Busy lately?" she inquired, feigning casual interest. Julian, his gaze fixed on his plate, responded without looking up. "It's fine. People never stop going out. There's always something to celebrate." "I'm glad to hear that. You seem so busy lately. I barely see you." Julian glanced up for a fleeting moment. A flicker of annoyance crossed his eyes before he quickly masked it with a smile. "You know how it is. I'm working hard now so we can be comfortable later." Naomi nodded, but her mind remained unconvinced. The dinner concluded in an uncomfortable silence. When Julian retreated to the bedroom, she remained in the living room with her laptop, pretending to check emails. Curiosity, however, compelled her to examine Julian's phone, which he had carelessly left on the table. She knew the passcode. There was a time when they had shared everything without reservation. Naomi swiftly unlocked the phone and scrolled through recent messages. One exchange, with a contact saved as P, immediately grabbed her attention. The message read, "All set for tomorrow. Remember, there can't be any mistakes." Naomi's heart began to race. What were they discussing? The message was cryptic, yet its tone filled her with a sense of foreboding. Julian had never been a man of secrets, or so she had always believed. She quickly closed the phone as she heard Julian's footsteps approaching. He stopped in the doorway and looked at her, his expression neutral. "Still working?" he asked, his tone almost accusatory. "Yeah, a couple of things to review," Naomi replied, hastily closing her laptop. Julian nodded and returned to the bedroom without another word. She remained seated on the sofa, feeling the carefully constructed facade of her marriage begin to crumble. The unsettling sensation of being watched washed over her, as if her every move were being scrutinized. The tension escalated days later when Naomi and Julian attended a dinner with close friends. On the surface, everything appeared perfect. Julian was charming, attentive, and engaging. Everyone at the table remarked on how well they complemented each other as a couple. But Naomi couldn't help but notice Julian consistently avoided prolonged eye contact with her. During the dinner, Chloe, Naomi's closest friend, sensed something was amiss. She seized a moment alone in the restroom to ask, "Naomi, is everything okay? You've been a little distant tonight." Naomi hesitated before answering, struggling to maintain a neutral tone. "Sure, just tired from work." Chloe looked at her intently, as if she could see straight through her facade. "You know you can tell me anything. I've always been here for you." "I know, Chloe." "Thank you," Naomi replied, forcing a smile before returning to the table. As the dinner drew to a close, Julian insisted on lingering for a few more minutes to converse with one of the men in the group, while Naomi waited in the car. From the passenger seat, she observed Julian speaking in a tone that seemed more serious than usual. The man he was speaking with handed him an envelope, which Julian quickly slipped into the inside pocket of his jacket. On the drive home, Naomi fought to suppress her rising anxiety, but she couldn't resist asking, "What were you and that man talking about?" Julian kept his eyes fixed on the road as he responded calmly, "Club business. Nothing that would interest you." The coldness in his reply struck Naomi like a shock of ice water. For the first time in years, she felt utterly alone beside the man with whom she had built her life. That night, while Julian slept soundly, Naomi remained awake in the living room, nursing a glass of wine and gazing at the Atlanta skyline through the window. A torrent of thoughts swirled in her mind. What was happening with Julian? What was the meaning of those cryptic messages? The feeling of imminent danger was undeniable, yet she possessed no concrete evidence, only her intuition, and that wasn't enough to take action. The sound of Julian's phone vibrating on the table startled her from her reverie. This time she didn't hesitate. She checked the screen and saw a message from P. "Don't fail." Fear and confusion overwhelmed her. She resolved to avoid confrontation, at least for the time being. She needed more information before jumping to conclusions. But deep down, a dark truth was beginning to dawn. Julian was not the man she thought she knew. In that moment, as the city continued its nightly rhythm, Naomi made a firm decision to protect herself, though she had no clear idea how. The man sleeping in the next room was no longer her husband. He had become an enigma, and every step she took from that point forward would be fraught with a danger she was only beginning to perceive. The insistent shrill of the alarm clock filled the room, but Naomi was already awake. She had spent a restless night, unable to escape the troubling thoughts that invaded her mind. Every time she closed her eyes, the ominous words of the message from P echoed disturbingly. "Tomorrow is the day. Don't fail." She looked at Julian, who was sleeping peacefully beside her. The serenity on his face stood in stark contrast to the turmoil she felt within. The trust she had once placed in him continued to erode with each passing moment. Naomi knew she had to act, but she also knew that one wrong move could cost her everything, even her life. Upon arriving at her office, Naomi struggled to focus on her cases. Her assistant, Layla, noticed her distraction and commented casually, "Looks like you didn't sleep well. Everything okay at home?" "Just a bit of work stress." "Nothing out of the ordinary," Naomi replied, forcing her tone to sound nonchalant. Layla nodded and left the office, but her words left Naomi with an unsettling feeling. Was it that obvious that something was wrong? Could Julian sense that she was becoming increasingly distant? After reviewing documents for hours without truly absorbing their content, Naomi made a pivotal decision. She would hire a private investigator. Her reputation as a successful attorney had connected her with trusted professionals in various fields, and the man she chose, Darius Stone, was renowned for his discretion. When she called him, her voice trembled slightly. "I need your help. It's delicate, and I don't want anyone to know." "Of course, Miss Vance, tell me where and when," Darius replied. That same evening, Naomi met Darius at a discreet coffee shop. Though she was concealed beneath a scarf and dark sunglasses, she still worried that someone might recognize her. Darius was a man of few words, but his presence inspired confidence. "What do you need me to investigate?" he asked, pulling out a small notebook to take notes. Naomi hesitated before answering. Saying it aloud made everything feel more real. It's my husband. I think he's planning something against me. He's been acting strange, receiving suspicious messages. I need to know who he's meeting and what he's doing when he's not at home. Darius regarded her seriously, carefully noting every detail. I'll do everything possible to get answers, but you have to be prepared for what might come out of this. Sometimes the truth is darker than we expect. Naomi felt a shiver run down her spine. Days later, Darius delivered his first report. Naomi received it at the office, locking the door before opening the envelope. Inside were photographs of Julian meeting with a burly man with visible scars on his face. The images showed them talking animatedly in an alley behind Julian's nightclub. There was something deeply unsettling about the man's demeanor, the way he shook Julian's hand as if finalizing a deal. Along with the photos, Darius included information about the man. Duke Miller. He's linked to an organized crime group known for extortion and disappearances. Naomi's heart sank as she read the name. Duke had a criminal history that included charges for kidnapping, though he had never been convicted. The connection between him and Julian was deeply alarming. Naomi called Darius immediately. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Why would my husband be meeting with someone like him?" "I don't know yet, but there's something else you should know," Darius replied cautiously. "I intercepted another conversation between them. They talked about the plan. They didn't mention specifics, but it's clear they are organizing something, and it doesn't sound legal." Naomi's blood ran cold as she heard those words. For years, she had dealt with criminals in her professional life, but she never imagined that something like this would infiltrate her own home. The image of Julian as the kind, trustworthy man she had married began to shatter completely. That night, Naomi attempted to confront Julian. She could no longer conceal her unease. During dinner, she watched him intently, searching for any telltale sign of guilt. Julian, as if sensing her probing gaze, raised an eyebrow and smiled. "What's wrong? You're very quiet today." Naomi decided to test the waters. "I'm just worried you're working too much at the club. I don't want you getting into trouble with dangerous people." Julian put down his fork and stared at her for a moment. His expression seemed to harden before softening once more. "Why would you say that? Have you heard something?" he asked, his tone more defensive than he probably intended. "No, nothing. I just want you to be okay. You know I'm always here for you." The smile Julian returned was superficial, almost forced. The conversation quickly shifted topics, but Naomi knew that something in him had changed. Perhaps he suspected she was uncovering his secrets. The breaking point came the next day when Naomi received an unexpected call from Darius. The investigator's tone was urgent. "We have a problem. It seems Julian is suspecting something. Duke was seen talking to one of my men. I'm sure it wasn't a coincidence." Naomi felt the ground give way beneath her feet. "What does that mean? Am I in danger?" "I'm not sure. But if Julian is aware that you're investigating him, he could accelerate his plan. You need to be extremely careful, Naomi. I think you should consider involving the police." The advice resonated in her mind for hours. As the days passed, the tension in her home became unbearable. Julian was more attentive, almost as if he were trying to distract her. He brought her flowers and invited her to romantic dinners, but Naomi knew it was all a facade. Behind that manufactured kindness lurked something sinister, something she had to expose before it was too late. That night, while Naomi reviewed Darius's documents again, she noticed a detail she had previously overlooked. Julian had made substantial wire transfers to an anonymous account weeks earlier. The dates coincided with his meetings with Duke. Naomi felt like time was running out. Her life, her future, everything was at stake, and the man she shared her bed with could be her greatest threat. The storm that had begun with cryptic messages and clandestine meetings was now on the verge of erupting. Naomi knew that the betrayal was not only real, but potentially deadly. Dawn brought a pivotal decision for Naomi. The night before, after hours of agonizing deliberation, she had reached a conclusion. She could no longer continue alone. The danger was imminent, and the instinct for survival finally compelled her to cross a line she never thought she would have to. That morning, with a mixture of fear and resolve, she made her way to the Atlanta Police Department's Zone 5 precinct. At the station, the detective in charge, Marcus Jones, was a seasoned officer known for his patience and his ability to handle complex cases. When Naomi entered his office, he greeted her with a look that conveyed both respect and curiosity. He knew who she was. Her name was well known in legal circles, and he couldn't ignore the palpable tension that radiated from her. "Miss Vance, how can I help you?" Detective Jones asked, gesturing to the seat in front of his desk. Naomi took a deep breath before responding. Every word she was about to utter brought her one step closer to the truth, but also closer to danger. "I believe my husband is planning to kill me," she blurted out, without embellishment or hesitation. The silence that followed was heavy and oppressive. Detective Jones stared at her, assessing her words and her expression. "Do you have any evidence to support what you're saying?" he asked in a calm but firm tone. Naomi opened her bag and placed Darius's report, the photographs, and the messages she had found on Julian's phone on the desk. Detective Jones took his time reviewing the documents, nodding slightly as he read. "This is serious. If what you're saying is true, we need to proceed with extreme caution. One wrong move and we could alert him. Are you willing to cooperate with us?" Detective Jones asked, looking Naomi directly in the eyes. "I will provide you with whatever is necessary to stop him, but I need assurance that he won't be able to escape if he discovers that I know anything." "I don't know what he might do to me," Naomi responded, her voice trembling. The plan began to take shape that same afternoon. Detective Jones gathered his team, and they discussed possible strategies. The primary objective was to obtain more solid evidence that could stand up in court. While the recordings and photographs were a good starting point, they needed explicit confirmation of Julian's intentions. To that end, they decided to infiltrate an informant into the meetings between him and Duke. Naomi watched in silence as the officers discussed the details. The feeling of being at the center of a police operation was surreal, but she knew she had no other choice. Her safety depended on them. "What happens if they discover the informant?" Naomi asked, unable to conceal her worry. "It's a risk that always exists, but we are prepared to manage it. Our job is to ensure your safety at all times," Detective Jones replied in a reassuring tone. Despite the detective's attempts to offer comfort, Naomi couldn't ignore the growing unease within her. Everything she had believed in for years, her marriage, her life, was collapsing before her eyes. Days later, the police managed to place the informant, a man named Leo Walker, within Duke's circle of trust. Leo, with his tough demeanor and ability to gain the confidence of dangerous men, began working as a supposed collaborator in Duke's operations. The first recordings he provided revealed alarming details. In a captured conversation, Duke and Julian spoke candidly about the plan. "Everything is ready. We just need her to trust the routine. She doesn't suspect a thing. She's too naive," Julian said in a cold tone that Naomi barely recognized as her husband's. "Are you sure there won't be any problems? I don't want anything to go wrong and come back to haunt us," Duke responded with a warning tone. "Trust me, everything will go exactly as planned. By the time anyone realizes what's happened, it will be too late," Julian concluded. Naomi listened to the recording in Detective Jones's office, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Each word was like a dagger, piercing the image she had carefully constructed of Julian. She felt a mix of fear and fury, but above all a profound sense of sadness. That man, the same one who had promised her eternal love, was now discussing her life as if it were a mere obstacle to be eliminated. "Is this enough to move forward with the operation?" Detective Jones asked as he turned off the recorder. "But I need you to know that it will be dangerous. Are you sure you want to continue?" Naomi looked up, her eyes filled with determination. "There's no turning back. If we don't stop him now, he'll end up carrying out his goal." Controversy arose when the team proposed that Naomi should actively participate in the operation. The idea was to record a conversation between her and Julian where she, without directly confronting him, would prod him to reveal more details of his plan. Detective Jones knew it was a risk, but it was also the best way to obtain a direct confession. Naomi was terrified. The thought of facing Julian, knowing what he was planning, was overwhelming, but her fear transformed into anger when she replayed the recordings in her mind. He viewed her as a disposable object, an obstacle to be removed. She was not willing to allow it. That night, when Julian arrived home, Naomi greeted him with a practiced smile. The police had concealed a microphone in her necklace, and every word would be transmitted in real time to Detective Jones's team. "I've missed you, Julian. I feel like we've been so distant lately," Naomi said as she poured 2 glasses of wine. Julian seemed disconcerted by her demeanor, but he settled onto the sofa and accepted the glass. "I've been busy with work. You know how it is," he replied casually. "Sometimes I wonder if it's all worth it. So much effort, so many hours away from each other. I just want us to be okay like before." Julian looked at her with a mixture of caution and something darker. For a few seconds, silence filled the room. "We are fine, Naomi. You don't have anything to worry about," he finally said, though his tone lacked warmth. Naomi felt her heart pound, but she forced herself to remain composed. "I just want you to know that I trust you. I always have. No matter what happens, I'm here for you." The words were laden with a double meaning that did not escape Julian's notice. Though he didn't respond immediately, his gaze was intense, almost as if he were trying to decipher Naomi's true intentions. When they went up to the bedroom, Julian embraced her tighter than usual. Naomi felt a chill run down her body, but she didn't pull away. She knew that every passing moment was a dangerous game, and the slightest sign of weakness could jeopardize the entire plan. Inside, Naomi knew that the worst was yet to come, but she was also prepared to face it. Her life no longer belonged solely to her. Now it was part of a larger struggle, a fight to survive and reclaim her freedom. Hours later, Naomi and Detective Jones's plan would unfold. The night was dark and silent when Naomi met the police team in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Beams from flashlights barely illuminated the space, revealing the scene. A technical team checked cameras, makeup, and recording equipment. Detective Jones, his expression serious, reviewed the details of the operation. "This is what we'll do," Detective Jones said, pointing to a blueprint on an improvised table. "We need everything to appear as a genuine accident. The key will be capturing Julian's reaction. If he reacts as we anticipate, we'll have enough evidence to arrest him." Naomi stood next to the table, nodding, her jaw clenched. Each word she heard served as a stark reminder of the surreal nature of the situation. She was not just the victim. She was now a crucial element in a trap designed to expose the man she had once loved. Hours later, the warehouse had been transformed into a carefully orchestrated scene of chaos. Makeup artists worked with precision to create false injuries on Naomi's body. Her face was covered with artificial cuts and blood, and her hands trembled as she looked at her reflection in a shattered mirror. "Is this necessary, Naomi?" the special effects technician asked while adjusting the details on her skin. His tone was professional, but his words did little to calm her. Naomi took a deep breath and looked away. She didn't want to see herself as a victim, not when she was fighting to remain strong. The plan was simple in theory, but every step was laden with uncertainty. The operation would take place on a lightly trafficked road near the city. The police would simulate a car accident in which Naomi would appear to be the only one involved. A wrecked car, skid marks on the asphalt, and an immobile body. Everything had to be convincing. The team moved with precision, installing hidden cameras nearby. Naomi lay on the ground covered by a sheet while technicians checked the final details. Detective Jones knelt beside her and spoke in a low voice. "You're certain about this, right? We can still call it off. There's no other option." "This has to work," Naomi replied. Though her voice trembled slightly, Detective Jones nodded and stood up. Naomi closed her eyes and tried to calm her breathing. She could hear the sounds of cars in the distance and the murmur of the team working. Every second felt like an eternity. When everything was ready, Detective Jones made an anonymous call to the nightclub where Julian worked. The message was clear. Naomi had been in an accident and was in critical condition. Julian's reaction would be the key. If he truly was involved in a plot against her, his response would betray him. From a nearby van, the police team monitored the cameras. Naomi, still immobile on the ground, wore a small, concealed microphone that would capture any words spoken near her. Detective Jones watched the screens with a grim expression, awaiting Julian's arrival. When Julian arrived, his car braked abruptly in the middle of the road. He rushed out, but instead of running toward the scene of the supposed accident, he paused a few feet away, observing. The expression on his face was difficult to decipher. There was no desperation or genuine concern, only a cold calm. "So I didn't have to lift a finger after all," he muttered to himself, but his voice was picked up by the microphones. The team in the van held their breath. Julian cautiously approached Naomi's body, his footsteps echoing eerily in the night. "I suppose it's far too late now," he remarked with a twisted, unsettling smile. His words hung in the air like the sharp edge of a knife. He then retrieved his phone and dialed a number. "It's done, P. Everything is finished. It didn't go exactly as we planned, but in the end it turned out even better. Now we just need to wait for things to calm down and then we can finally move forward." Inside the surveillance van, Detective Jones nodded to the other agents. They had enough. The audio and video recordings provided undeniable confirmation of their suspicions. Julian displayed not only a complete lack of remorse but seemed to be reveling in it. The agents moved swiftly, surrounding Julian before he could react. He attempted to resist, but they easily subdued him. Naomi, still lying on the ground, slowly opened her eyes. With the assistance of an officer, she sat up. Her body trembled, not from the cold night air, but from the sheer intensity of the moment. Julian stared at her in disbelief as they placed him in handcuffs. This is a setup. You can't do this to me," he yelled, his voice filled with rage and betrayal. Naomi approached him slowly, her gaze unwavering. Tears welled in her eyes, but there was also a newfound strength that Julian had never witnessed before. "You brought this on yourself, Julian. I simply ensured that justice was served." As the police led Julian away, his figure disappearing into the darkness, Naomi remained near the staged accident scene. Detective Jones approached her and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing, Naomi. This won't be easy, but you're safe now." Naomi nodded, though she wasn't entirely convinced by those words. She had won a battle, but the cost was far greater than she could bear at that moment. She looked at the wrecked car and the hidden cameras, wondering if she could ever truly recover the life she had lost. As the operation drew to a close, an officer approached Naomi with the phone in hand. "Naomi, you need to hear this. It's a voicemail left by Duke." His tone was mocking, almost as if he knew he was being recorded. "You think it's over? This is just the beginning. Julian wasn't alone, and neither will you be." The message silenced everyone. Detective Jones frowned, exchanging a worried glance with Naomi. "This isn't over. We need to be prepared for what's coming." Naomi gazed into the distance, realizing that her struggle had only just begun. The shadows surrounding Julian were far deeper than she had imagined, and she now understood that her life would never be the same. Hours later, the tension in the interrogation room was almost palpable. Julian sat on the other side of the table, handcuffed, staring blankly at the floor. His expression shifted between suppressed rage and icy indifference. Behind the two-way mirror, Naomi watched the scene alongside Detective Jones. Despite knowing she was safe, Julian's proximity filled her with a visceral fear that she struggled to control. "We need him to talk, but it won't be easy," Detective Jones murmured, crossing his arms as he studied Julian through the glass. "He's intelligent and aware that anything he says can be used against him. I know him. He'll try to play the innocent, the betrayed husband. But we know the truth of what he is." Naomi replied with a resolve that masked the turmoil within her. Detective Jones nodded before entering the room, leaving Naomi behind the glass. She knew this moment would be crucial, but that didn't make it any easier. Her hands trembled slightly as she clenched her fists, attempting to manage the overwhelming emotions threatening to consume her. Inside the room, Detective Jones placed a recorder on the table and sat down opposite Julian. "So, Julian, care to explain why you were celebrating your wife's death instead of being concerned about her well-being?" Julian slowly looked up, offering a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I have no idea what you're talking about. I received a call informing me of her accident, and when I arrived, I was surprised to find a staged scene. You should be questioning her, not me. We have recordings, Julian. Messages, bank transfers. Everything indicates that you plan to eliminate Naomi. And you weren't alone. We need the names of your accomplices." Julian leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low and venomous tone. "Circumstantial evidence. Nothing a good lawyer can't dismantle. And as for my accomplices, I have no idea what you're talking about. Perhaps you should investigate the people Naomi trusts. Maybe she's not as innocent as she wants you to believe." Detective Jones remained calm, but behind the glass, Naomi felt her heart pounding. Julian's manipulation was calculated, and his ability to twist the narrative was terrifying. For a moment, she was reminded of why she had fallen for him: his charisma and confidence. Now, those same qualities made him incredibly dangerous. Later, in a separate room, Naomi sat facing Detective Jones and the investigation team. On the table lay a detailed report containing Julian's recordings and financial history. Each page served as a stark reminder of how she had lived with a man who had betrayed her in the most profound way. "Duke is our immediate priority. We know he was involved in the plan, but that voicemail implies there are others involved. This could be much larger than we initially thought," Detective Jones said, pointing to notes within the report. "What does that mean for me? Isn't catching Julian enough?" Naomi asked, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "Julian is just one piece of the puzzle. If Duke has more allies, they may attempt something against you. We need to guarantee your safety while we continue the investigation." Naomi nodded, though the thought of living under constant surveillance only made her feel more trapped. She had dreamed of the moment Julian was arrested, believing it would mark the end of her nightmare. But now she realized it was only the beginning. That night, in the solitude of a safe room provided by the police, Naomi struggled to process everything that was happening. The walls were cold and bare, a stark contrast to the home she had shared with Julian. She sat on the edge of the bed, clutching her phone. She decided to call Chloe, her best friend. She needed a human connection, someone unrelated to the police operation or the horrors surrounding her. "Chloe, it's me." Her voice trembled slightly. "Naomi, I've been so worried. I haven't heard from you since. Well, since everything broke on the news. Are you okay?" "I don't know. It all feels so unreal. Julian is in custody, but there's still so much I don't understand. Everything I thought I knew about my life about him has completely collapsed." Chloe paused, her tone filled with concern. "You're stronger than you think, Naomi. You've survived all of this and you're not alone. Don't let him or anyone else make you feel otherwise." Chloe's words offered a moment of comfort, but the sense of impending threat remained. She hung up and lay down on the bed, closing her eyes tightly. Despite being surrounded by secure walls, she felt more vulnerable than ever. The next day brought an unexpected turn. Detective Jones called Naomi to the precinct to show her a new recording. Leo, the informant who had infiltrated Duke's circle, had captured a crucial conversation. "They're looking to finish what Julian couldn't do. They want to silence her permanently before she can testify," Detective Jones said, his tone more serious than usual. "Why? They already have Julian. What more could they possibly want?" Naomi asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "This isn't just about you. It seems there are other illicit businesses at stake, and your testimony could expose them. To them, you are a problem that needs to be eliminated." Detective Jones's words struck Naomi like a blast of icy wind. She wasn't just facing Julian, but a network of individuals willing to do anything to protect their interests. Fear and rage swirled within her, But instead of paralyzing her, they ignited a deeper resolve, a fierce determination to survive and bring them all to justice. We will provide everything necessary to protect you. But this means things could become even more dangerous before it ends, Detective Jones said, looking directly at her. I don't care what it costs. I will not let them silence me. They played with me, but now I'll play with them, Naomi replied, her voice filled with an intensity that surprised even the detective. The war had not ended. It was only just beginning. Rain lashed heavily against the windows of the precinct. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Naomi sat in a conference room, surrounded by a team of officers reviewing the details of the next phase of the operation. The message captured by Leo had changed everything. Now it wasn't just about prosecuting Julian, but dismantling the entire network behind him. Detective Jones rose from his chair and walked around the room with deliberate steps. He fixed his gaze on Naomi, who was looking back at him, searching for some reassurance that this would all be over soon. Naomi, here's what we're going to do, Detective Jones said gravely. Leo has given us key information about the location of a meeting between Duke and the rest of his allies. It's set to take place at a warehouse outside the city. We believe they plan to discuss how to eliminate you and ensure Julian doesn't talk. Naomi swallowed hard. Every time she heard the word eliminate, she felt something inside her break. But she couldn't show weakness, not when she was so close to confronting those who had tried to destroy her. What do you need me to do? She asked, her voice firm despite the anxiety consuming her. Detective Jones shook his head. I don't want you anywhere near that meeting. It's far too dangerous. This isn't just about you. This is my problem. I won't sit by while others risk their lives for something I started, Naomi responded, standing up from her chair. The room fell silent. Detective Jones looked at her with a mix of admiration and concern, knowing that arguing with her would be futile. Fine, but this is non-negotiable. You will be under our direct protection. And if anything goes wrong, your safety is our absolute priority. That night, the team prepared for the operation. In a disguised vehicle, Naomi and Detective Jones waited at a safe distance from the warehouse. From their vantage point, they could see the flickering lights and figures entering and leaving the building. Leo was already inside, equipped with a hidden microphone that transmitted everything in real time. They're here. Duke just arrived with 2 other men, Leo reported over the radio. His voice sounded calm, but Naomi knew every word was fraught with danger. From the vehicle, Naomi listened to the conversation intently. Duke was speaking, and his tone was as cold as she had imagined. We can't risk it. She's already made too much noise. If she testifies, she'll sink not only us but everyone else. We need to finish this and fast. One of the men responded, his voice rough and filled with distrust. What if the police already know too much? It might not be as easy as you think. That's why we have a plan, Duke retorted. The men are ready. It's just a matter of waiting for the right moment. Naomi felt the air in her lungs grow heavy. They were talking about her as if she were an object, an obstacle to be removed for their convenience. Rage swelled inside her, but she couldn't let it control her. She needed to think clearly. Detective Jones gave the signal for his team to move. Several police vehicles surrounded the warehouse, blocking all exits. Inside, Leo maintained his cover, feigning surprise when the agents burst in with weapons raised. Freeze! Police! Everyone on the ground! One of the officers shouted as the tension exploded. Duke and his men tried to resist. One of them fired towards the agents, unleashing an exchange of gunfire that echoed throughout the building. From the vehicle, Naomi listened to the shots, her heart beating frantically. Detective Jones, sitting next to her, monitored the operation with a radio in his hand. We have 2 detainees. Duke is resisting, but he won't get far, one of the agents reported. The confrontation continued for several minutes until the police managed to subdue Duke and the other men. When it was over, silence filled the space, broken only by the sound of handcuffs clicking shut and the agent's orders. Duke was taken to the precinct and placed in a separate cell from Julian. Naomi, still processing the intensity of the operation, decided to see him. Detective Jones tried to dissuade her, but she insisted. She needed to confront him, see him face to face, and understand what kind of monster had been conspiring against her life. When Naomi entered the interrogation room, Duke looked at her with a mocking smile. There was no remorse on his face, only contempt. "The little princess thinks she's strong now," Duke said sarcastically. "You think because you caught Julian and me this is over? You have no idea what you've started." "I know exactly what I've started. And I also know that you and your allies are going to pay for all the damage you've caused," Naomi replied with a resolve that surprised even Detective Jones, who was observing from outside. "Allies?" Duke sneered. "You think this is just about me and Julian? There are people much bigger than us. People who wouldn't hesitate to destroy you if you keep sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." Naomi stared at him, letting his words sink in. She wasn't going to let Duke intimidate her. "Then they will fall too because I'm not going to stop until all of this ends," she said before getting up and leaving the room. That night, as Naomi returned to her safe room, the feeling of danger persisted. She knew she had won an important battle, but Duke's words continued to resonate in her mind. This wasn't over. There were more people involved, more secrets to uncover, and although the path ahead was terrifying, she was determined to face it. She looked out the window, watching the city lights in the distance. She was more alone than ever, but also more resolute. It wasn't just for her. It was for all the people who had ever been silenced by those who hadn't had the chance to fight. And she knew she wouldn't stop until the truth came to light. The light from the monitors illuminated the small room where the investigation team reviewed the latest recordings obtained after Duke's capture. In the audios, names, addresses, and fragments of conversations could be heard, revealing a scheme far larger than anyone had anticipated. Every word made it clear that the network of corruption and organized crime didn't end with Julian and Duke. There was something deeper, a structure designed to operate in the shadows. Naomi sat next to Detective Jones, feeling the weight of each revelation. At times, the rage and fear were suffocating, but she knew that backing down was not an option. "We have new names. Some of them are linked to major corporations and government contracts. This isn't just a case of attempted homicide anymore. Naomi, this could be the beginning of something much bigger," Detective Jones said, pointing to the screen. "And what do we do now?" Naomi asked, her voice restrained but with a tone of urgency. "The first thing is to protect you. You're a target not only for being the initial victim, but because now they know you have enough information to hurt them." Naomi nodded, though the feeling of constant danger was no longer new to her. She looked at the screen where one man in particular stood out in the records. Clayton Albright. The image of the man with his neatly groomed face and elegant demeanor struck her like a lightning bolt. Albright was not only an influential businessman with political connections, he was her stepfather. The air seemed to thicken as Naomi processed the discovery. Her relationship with Albright had always been distant, marked by his cold and controlling attitude. But she never imagined he could be involved in something like this. "Albright? He can't be involved," she murmured, more to herself than to Detective Jones. "You know him?" Detective Jones asked, noticing the change in her demeanor. Naomi nodded slowly. "He's my stepfather. He was married to my mother for years. He was always a reserved, controlling man, but I didn't think he was capable of this." The silence that followed was tense. Detective Jones looked at her seriously, assessing what he had just heard. "This complicates things significantly. If Albright is involved, it means this has become deeply personal. We need to act quickly before he does something to cover his tracks." The urgency of the situation prompted the team to intercept Albright's communications. What they heard confirmed their worst fears. In one of the captured calls, Albright spoke with someone whose voice Naomi immediately recognized. Her mother, Adrian. "Everything is getting complicated. Naomi is far too involved. We can't let this come to light, or it will end up sinking us," Albright said in an authoritarian tone. I warned you, Clayton. Her mother responded with a chilling coldness. I told you we should have acted sooner, but you hesitated, and now everything is out of control. Naomi felt the ground beneath her feet begin to crumble. Her own mother, the woman who should protect her, was complicit with Albright in a plan to destroy her. It can't be, she said softly, her hands trembling as she listened to the rest of the conversation. We can still salvage this, Albright continued. If we manage to make her disappear before she testifies, everything will calm down. Julian is already out of the picture. Now she's the only obstacle. Naomi looked away from the screen, unable to listen any further. Detective Jones looked at her with concern, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. I know this is a lot, but we need you to stay strong. What they just said is enough to incriminate them both. We will act, but it will be risky. My mother, Naomi said, her voice barely a whisper. All this time she knew. She was with them. We're going to stop them. This isn't just about them. This is for everything you've been through. We won't let this go unpunished. That night, the team organized a raid on Albright's mansion, where they believed he still kept incriminating documents. The operation was charged with tension, not only because of the magnitude of the case but because of the personal implications for Naomi. She was in a nearby van observing through real-time cameras. When the agents broke into the property, they found Albright and her mother engaged in a heated argument. Documents were scattered across a table, evidencing contracts, transfers, and a network of illegal activities. This is a mistake. You have nothing on me, Albright shouted as the agents handcuffed him. And what are you going to do with her? Arrest a mother for protecting her daughter? Her mother said with a bitter smile as she gestured towards the police. From the van, Naomi watched the heartbreaking scene. Detective Jones approached and asked if she wanted to go inside, but she shook her head. I can't see her now. I can't face her. Hours later at the precinct, Albright and her mother were placed in separate cells. Naomi, though emotionally exhausted, decided to confront her mother. She walked slowly toward the interrogation room where her mother was sitting, handcuffed and with a weary look. Why? Naomi asked, her voice breaking. Her mother looked up, her eyes showing a mixture of sadness and coldness. I did what I had to do. Clayton promised me we would be safe, that you would be safe. I never imagined it would go this far. Safe? You wanted to destroy me. Naomi responded, her words filled with rage. You don't understand. You can't understand. Everything I did was for us. But you became a problem, Naomi. You left me no other option. Naomi felt tears streaming down her face, but she couldn't stop them. She looked at her mother one last time before leaving the room, leaving behind a silence that seemed eternal. That night, as the team reviewed the seized documents, Detective Jones approached Naomi and offered her a cup of coffee. You took a significant step today. This isn't going to be easy, but we're closer to ending this. Naomi nodded, although the words of comfort barely made a dent in her pain. She had lost her mother, not just physically but emotionally. The enemy had not only been in the shadows, but in her own home. But she knew she couldn't stop. Not now. The fight was far from over, and she wouldn't allow herself to fall. Months later, the day of the trial had arrived. The courtroom was packed, the tension palpable in every corner as voices murmured around Naomi, who was seated next to the prosecutors. It was the day to face Julian, Duke, Albright, and most difficult of all, her own mother. The mountain of evidence accumulated by the police, from the recordings to the confiscated documents, had made this case a matter of national interest. Naomi, hands clasped, watched as the judge took his seat. Facing her were the defendants, each wearing a different expression. Julian avoided her gaze, Duke wore a mocking smile, and Albright maintained an expression of false serenity. Her mother, Adrian, on the other hand, looked like a ghost of her former self with dull eyes and her head bowed. The lead prosecutor opened the case forcefully, presenting a detailed summary of the crimes. Conspiracy to commit murder, corruption, money laundering, and manipulation of contracts. Each word struck Naomi's heart with the force of a hammer, But she remained firm. It was her moment to regain control of her life. During the trial, the recordings of Julian and Duke were played before the court. The voices of both men meticulously planning how to get rid of Naomi resonated in the room. Julian kept his eyes downcast, while Duke seemed to enjoy the attention. Then it was the turn of the evidence linking Albright to the corruption network. The bank transfers and illegal contracts spoke for themselves. When it was her mother's turn, Naomi felt the air grow heavy. The prosecutor presented the telephone conversations that incriminated her, showing how she had actively collaborated with Albright. Her mother did not deny anything. When the judge gave her the opportunity to speak, she looked up at Naomi, but her words did not seek absolution. I made mistakes, but they were out of desperation. I never wanted this to end this way. There is no justification for what I did, but I hope that someday you can understand, she said. Her mother's words, although laden with regret, could not erase the pain she had caused. After weeks of hearings, the day of sentencing arrived. The judge, in a solemn tone, began reading the convictions. Julian Vance, for conspiracy to commit murder and money laundering, is hereby sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, without the possibility of parole. Julian barely reacted. His face hardened by defeat. Francisco Duke Miller, for conspiracy and participation in organized criminal activities, is hereby sentenced to 25 years in federal prison with parole reviewable after 15 years. Duke merely shrugged, as if the weight of the sentence didn't matter to him. Clayton Albright, for corruption, conspiracy to commit murder and manipulation of government contracts, is hereby sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. Here's the translation and rewrite, keeping the tone and style you requested. Without the possibility of parole. Albright, though outwardly composed, couldn't quite mask the tension that clenched his jaw, a subtle giveaway of the fury he contained. The judge paused, a beat of silence hanging in the air, before delivering the final sentence. Adrian Albright, for conspiracy to commit murder and subsequent cover-up, is hereby sentenced to 10 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole after serving half of that sentence. Naomi experienced a complex mix of relief and profound sadness. The court's decision severed her mother from her life. Yet she found solace in knowing she had acted with unwavering integrity by testifying against her. When the proceedings concluded, Naomi emerged from the courthouse into a throng of reporters and flashing cameras. Questions bombarded her from every direction, but she remained silent, a fortress of quiet resolve. Accompanied by Detective Jones, who had become an indispensable source of support throughout this ordeal, she walked towards the waiting car. "How do you feel?" Detective Jones inquired gently as they settled into the vehicle. "Relieved, I suppose, but also utterly exhausted. This is about justice, undoubtedly, but it's also the loss of everything I once held as true," Naomi replied, her gaze fixed on the world passing by outside the window. "What you've done is an act of immense courage, not only for yourself but for countless others who have endured similar suffering. This network, this web of deceit, will never again have the power to inflict such harm." Naomi nodded slowly. Detective Jones's words resonated with truth, but the emptiness within her remained, a void not easily filled. Victory had come at a steep price. Months later, Naomi had begun the arduous task of rebuilding her life. She had left her career as a patent lawyer and dedicated herself to establishing a foundation to aid victims of conspiracies and abuse. Her experiences had forged her into a strong and resilient advocate, a woman driven by a profound determination to make a lasting difference. One day, while immersed in organizing a charity event, she received a letter postmarked from the prison. It was from her mother. Naomi held the envelope in her hands for a long, silent moment before finally opening it. The message was brief but laden with raw emotion. Naomi, I know I have forfeited any right to ask anything of you, but I need you to know that I am filled with remorse. I don't expect your forgiveness, as I am not sure I even deserve it. My only hope is that you live a full, rich life, something I never knew how to achieve. I love you even if I am undeserving of that love. Mom. Naomi folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. She was unsure if she would ever be capable of offering forgiveness, but she also recognized that harboring hatred would lead only to further destruction. Deep within, a fragile healing had begun. That night, gazing at the city lights shimmering from her apartment window, Naomi felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for months. She knew the most brutal part of the struggle was behind her. Her life would forever be marked by what had happened, but she was ready to build something new, something infused with purpose and hope. And in that moment, for the first time since everything had fallen apart, she felt a flicker of belief that she would succeed. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks, so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.